There we go. Today, oh gosh, now it won't wash up. All right, exciting. Today we're going to talk about subgenres. Why are subgenres important? Because typically they're just as important as the genre when you are defining yourself both to your audience and to your potential future publisher if you decide to go the traditional route. If you decide to go to the independent route, it's incredibly important that you know how to market yourself appropriately by knowing your main genre and your subgenre. Um, and as far as traditional publishers go, they like knowing subgenres because they also need to know if and what kind of marketing things they need to do. For example, if you do a romantic comedy, it's going to be entirely differently advertised than if you do an action drama. You can notice this even when you're watching movie and TV commercials, right? If it's a romantic comedy TV show, it has certain things they'll show in the commercial. And same thing with an action drama. So you kind of need to know what you're marketing towards because that is going to really help whether you're independent or traditional, knowing where you're going with it. Now, next thing to generally talk about. What is the difference between a genre and a subgenre? Genre is going to be your main plot. And subgenre is going to be the lesser plot. So for example, like with a romantic comedy, typically that means that the romance is the main plot, right? They're falling in love, they're going to be together, will they, won't they, all that kind of jazz. The comedy bit comes in every once in a while when, he stubs his toe or something and falls all the way down the hill. And that's not really the plot, though. That's just something that adds a little spice to the overall romance. It makes it a little more interesting instead of just being like, oh, goo-goo eyes, and that's it. It has a little more to it. There's always going to be a genre and a subgenre, and maybe even multiple subgenres. A great example of this is Hunger Games. Hunger Games is a dystopia first, right? That's the main plot. Murder the tyrannical dictator. That's the main plot. But the subplots include a lot of different things. The subplots include rebellion. The subplots include family and friendship. The subplots include coming of age novel because she's kind of going from being a very responsible teenager to being a very responsible rebellion leader adult. And then you also, of course, have the lesser plot of romance, the classic trio of Gale versus Peeta. And so, but that's not the plot, is it? You're not saying, oh, is it going to be Gale or Peeta the entire time? You're saying, oh, is she going to live long enough to figure out whether it's Gale or Peeta? That tells you kind of which one's which. If you're saying X thing has to happen before Y thing can happen, then X thing is going to be your main plot. Y thing is going to be your subplot. Now, sometimes it can get mixed a plot issue, and that's something that can happen. I did a whole video on it if you want to check it out called How Not to Have Your Main Plot Swallowed by the Subplot Dragon. Because sometimes that's what it is, where the subplot is just going along and then all of a sudden it comes up, meow, just eats the main plot, and you're like, whoa, 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 hold on. That's supposed to be the subplot. So that can definitely happen, and that can be part of why it's confusing sometimes. I know that I worked with someone once who was like, oh yeah, it's a rom-com, and I was like, the subplot of angst against religion just ate this main plot, man. This has become I'm struggling to identify myself religiously novel, not a rom-com anymore. It got eaten. And so we had to go back and look at that. So it's important to correctly identify it, and also if you mean for it to be one thing and it doesn't stay that thing, that's when you need to have an editor or a beta reader go in and be like, okay, let's fix this. Because there's something missing here and it's not quite working. All right. Now, let's talk about some common subgenres and why they work so well together, just because it's good to know what works well together. So, perfect first example is the new genre of romantasy. Romance with a subplot of fantasy has been so popular for so long that they finally just made it its own genre. They were just like, screw having two genres. They need to merge because they've been this way for a long time. So this is typically when they're going like, oh, I'm in love with this guy, but drama. And then the subplot is, but at the same time, I also have to get ready to be coronated to be the queen of this magical fantasy land on the 21st or whatever. And so it's like, that's not the main plot. That's just something that extra is stressing her out while she's trying to figure it out. Or alternatively, it's even smaller than that. I know there was one where someone was saying it was basically, I don't remember what the title of the book was, but basically it was, if Regency romance plots had time to live. And I was like, oh, it's so cute. But also, that's not the main plot. It's just like, great, dragons. And so romantasy is one of those things that was romance and fantasy that became its own thing. And then of course rom-com, you've all heard of this, and it's become in some ways kind of like romantasy, its own genre, because of the fact that it's been mixed so many times, and it's so because a lot of people, we love to laugh and we love seeing people fall in love. And for those who don't like the romance as much, they get the comedy, and for those who don't, they get the romance. It's kind of a great blend. Another action comedy, again, this one is just simply because they highlight each other well. You have people being punched in the face dramatically, but also be laughing your guts out. It's a good combo because you're going, oh no, are they gonna die? And then you're immediately like, ha ha. And it makes you feel better. It's the reason why Marvel kind of went that direction, because they found out that this works really well. Yes.
It's also kind of interesting because like the action of it can be really serious, but then you combine that with like the complete opposite where you're just like laughing, and so when you like combine those opposite things, it can work really well.
It can work really well. That kind of gravedigger comedy where you have this very sad, very intense moment, but you break it up a little bit with lightheartedness, so that way your reader slash watcher is able to feel better about it. Because sometimes too much heavy content makes us go sad. And so having that comedy to break it up feels really good, right? Is comedy drama, and that's mainly because once again drama can be really heavy, right? You can be like, you betrayed me and you're in love with my sister, and it's like gasp, and everyone's like gasp, and then all of a sudden it's like, and I'm leaving, and they like slam the door, and then it's like, that's a closet, and then they leave again. And that makes it so you're starting to laugh again. Once again, it's kind of that gravedigger principle of you're having this serious moment, but you're not too consumed by it to the point where you're sad. You're feeling kind of like, okay, that was sad, that was intense, but I'm still okay. I can deal with this. All right, another one that is very common is science fiction drama or crime drama, because these are for the serious people. These are for the people who are like, I just want my stuff to be serious and only serious. And it's not easier to do with that because you can come up with all these crazy concepts like, my father's been possessed by gnats, or something like that, and that's a very serious concept. Or you can do a crime drama where it's like, I'm solving this murder, and my sister disappeared 20 years ago, and I'm solving this murder and solving this murder. It turns out that when they identify the skeleton, it's my sister. Or something dramatic like that. Yes.
What would you define as like the main genre of drama?
Drama, I would say, can be a sub or a main genre. It depends on, again, is the main plot. If the main plot is drama, then I is by all means a valid main genre, for sure. However, the reason drama tends to be more of a secondary genre is because then it starts getting a little soap opera-y if you have it as the main genre. And that's why they make fun of soap operas, is because they're like so trying hard to be dramatic that it almost gets goofy. Um, did I answer your question or not? Okay. So, any genre can be a main genre or a side genre or subgenre. With subgenres, though, the main thing you just want to, again, be aware of is that it's not consuming the main plot or overshadowing the main plot. You want it to be the main plot. It's kind of like in when you get handed a homework assignment, and they're like, highlight the most important parts of this word problem, right? You don't highlight the whole word problem. It's supposed to be little bits that you're highlighting and underlining. It's not necessarily the whole thing. It's a compliment. All right. Now, there are some that are less main genre-y. These are more themes, but they are called subgenres because of the fact that they have common that they're considered a subgenre. So I mentioned earlier with Hunger Games, coming of age. That's a very popular one. Harry Potter is technically a fantasy coming of age novel. because he starts out as 12, and by the end of the series, he's an adult. He's coming of age. He's becoming an adult, and that's why it kind of grows with you. That one's very popular because that way the series can grow up with people. You just have to write really heckin' fast. But as long as you write fast enough, it can grow up with people. It's like, they're 12, I'm 12. The next year, they're 13, I'm also 13. It's kind of cool, you know. And there are a lot of things like that. Things that also can just define the world. For example, there are lots of science fiction novels that are science fiction and steampunk, or science fiction and solar punk. That's simply defining what type of science fiction it is, right? Um, Same thing with science fiction post-apocalypse, defining the main genre, saying, hey, this is the main genre, but this is the specific main genre. So it's kind of like in those dichotomous keys you might in biology and things like that, where it's like, okay, so it's a tree, but that's not all it is, right? It's a pine tree, it's an aspen tree, and that's kind of what subgenres are, is they help define those more fine-tuned traits, again, so you can find your better audience. Because if you advertise your audience incorrectly, it's not going to work very well. If you're like, yes, I have this dramatic sci-fi, and I'm going to gear it towards rom-com lovers, they're all going to dislike it and be sad. um, there's a lot of other ones that we could talk about. Healing fiction, for example, is a new one that's kind of up and coming. That would be a main genre of fiction and subgenre of healing fiction. Healing fiction being like the person is undergoing something very dramatic and very hard, like a death or a loss in the family, and they're trying to grow and move past it. Healing fiction is very much a subgenre because sometimes it is the main genre, sometimes it is not. Most of the time, it's like it's a romance and it's healing fiction because through the romance they're able to get over their grandfather's death or something. You know, it's not typically a main genre, but there actually are a lot of main genre healing fictions nowadays. I know there was one recently that was a cozy fantasy healing fiction. And so technically it was a subgenre, but it was in some ways combined, kind of like rom-com, because it was about this, basically, this big tough dwarven man who had gone out to war, and he was coming back and he was trying to live life again and not be so traumatized. And so it was like cozy fantasy, but it was also healing fiction because he was trying to deal with the trauma of war. And so there's a lot of things like that where it kind of defines how your characters are, defines what they're like. You can also use it to define your characters too if you want. If you're like, this is a novel that takes place during in America during slavery, that is very defining for those characters. Even if it's like a murder mystery, that's still very defining if one of your characters is a slave. Questions about subgenres or main genres and how to tell the difference, or specific genres, or maybe a specific story that you're like, what the heck is the subgenre of this one? We can discuss. No? Do you need a minute to think? Oh, sure. Yeah.
Just a thought. Like, it's
Yeah.
interesting to see, because you're talking about the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
It reminds me of this one, like, somebody, like, mapped out the story.
Yeah.
And they kind of did that with subgenres, but instead of doing genres, they did different questions. And so there were 3 different questions. There were, will she survive the games? Will she love Peeta? And will she protect her family? And it showed how different events in the story, some of them were pertaining to only one of those questions.
Yes.
Some of them pertained to all 3. And it was really interesting to see that.
Absolutely. That is a great way to identify what your main and subgenre is, because if that question pertains to 90% of the novel, that is probably your main plot. If it only pertains to about 50% of your novel, it's probably your subplot. And that's why you can have so many multiple subplots, because like most people would probably say the Peeta one is the main subplot, but her protecting her family is absolutely a valid subplot. Her figuring out whether or not she actually even wants to be a rebel leader is also another subplot. There's a lot of subplots that you might get missed if you're not careful and not looking for them. And that's part of the reason why when you Google, even on Google, like what genre is this specific novel, you'll probably get a main genre, and then below it it'll be like subgenres include it has like 20 of them. Because sometimes that can happen. Even in novels where it's like mystery's the main plot, and it's like, but then it has this tiny subplot with adopting a dog. And it's like, yeah, so those kinds of things can absolutely happen. I completely agree. Any other questions or comments on subgenres?
Are we good?
Okay. Reiterating slash recapping, the most recent writing contest that we have is the fantasy writing contest. That one's due at the end of May. But obviously, take all the time you need. If you have to turn it in on the very last day, by all means do. I'd rather have a super well polished one turned in on the very last day than a semi well polished one turned in a month early. So like take your time, don't worry about it, don't stress. And even if you get sick or something, you have my email now. I email you regularly. You can go find my email and hit reply and send me a digital copy and I will not be banned. Next week we are going to be talking about journalism, since that was suggested by you. So that is the plan for next week. I'm going to turn off the video now, and you can ask any questions that you would like, or you can just chill and have some writing time as well.